Welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Karen.
And I'm Jonelle. We are a mother and daughter duo who love to have real, unfiltered conversations about our journey with privilege, bias, and growth. As always, one of us brings in a topic that the other is not prepped on. So you hear some genuine, off-the-cuff reactions, just like you would in life with your family and friends. We believe that honest dialogue, even when it's a little messy, is key to unlearning old patterns and opening up to new perspectives. If you want to dig deeper into anything we discuss, be sure to check out our blog, White Women Wake Up. Let's dive in. Karen, do you have a topic?
Well, I do, but before I start my topic, you know me, I want to do homework.
Oh, yeah.
No. Well, I just, every time we end with one of our conversations, it really impacts me. I really feel like, if anything, this blog is helping me. So one of the things we talked about last week, talked about this 1/3 rule. And after we were done talking, I thought about my own life, and I'm not in a position right now where I'm hiring anyone. I'm not at a boardroom. So it felt a little abstract. So I started thinking about what is 1/3 in my own life. So
Great.
am I giving 1/3 of my charity monies to racial places or places with equity that are centered on equity? Am I the media I'm consuming, the books I'm reading? And I did notice I have a proclivity to men, and nothing wrong with men. I love men, but it really made me start looking. So anyways, that was a place. So I did do some donation. Shout out to one of the places called Creative Reaction Lab. They're out of Missouri. They happened after Ferguson, and they do a lot of design equity work. And so I thought, okay, I can give a little monies there. So I'm going to try to really introduce that in my own life. So that was one area.
Love that. I think that is such a great perspective. You did better than I this week with kind of digging
It's not
in.
about better. We're not getting graded, remember?
No, good point. No, but I meant I think you gave a lot more space to that conversation, and I really appreciate it. I also right now am not in a space. I took a break from my corporate world, and so I'm not in a space where I'm empowering the third either in like a corporate setting or in a business setting. But I didn't think about it from the perspective of your money, which is like so obvious. I think I've thought about it more about time right now. I'm giving into kind of starting really work with some like social justice movements and so from a time perspective, I also think like I'm spending a lot of time trying to like build our TikTok brand, and in that sense, engaging way more than 1/3 of marginalized creators. So most of my TikTok feed are people of color, queer people, people with disabilities, just a whole. And so really kind of engaging and making sure I'm giving time to hear those voices. But I loved of course.
Yeah.
Money. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah. Books, everything. So anyways, that was actually really helpful. And then I also have to do a vulnerability thing here. And you're a result of that. So one of the things we keep talking about is this idea of asking questions and listening. We talked about that the other day when we were saying about having your friends over, that I never asked that family like what would work for them.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of assumed it would fit within my white cultural norms. So I did that to you the other day.
You did. And it was brutal.
It was brutal. I just walked in, told you what I thought, and didn't give you any space. And so I've apologized profusely, but it did make me think that, the reality is this is really a journey. We are never going to graduate from these studies. We are never going to graduate from these spaces. And in all humility, it's just intention. I don't even want to use the word work anymore because that feels like a negative thing. I just want to be intentional. I want to be intentional to hearing the voices of others. I want to be intentional in listening and rethinking my approach in life. And so I'm sorry.
I appreciate your apology, and I'm happy I'm happy you did some reflection. I think it's interesting. I did a lot of reflection too. So I know a lot of listeners and people who know me. I'm a pretty confident person. I'm pretty things that I'm knowledgeable in, I'm pretty confident and secure in. And in this case, we were talking about a consulting business that I'm trying to start for everyone. And it was interesting, your feedback. It was direct. It was not, again, it wasn't a conversation. It was direct, as you were saying. I walked away feeling like a child. It was really, I walked away, it kind of spiraled me into a couple days of extreme insecurity. And this is not to like shame you. No. This is not my intention. It was actually very surprising for me because that hadn't happened in a while. And so I think again, it goes back to these perspective of no matter how confident someone is coming across, you don't know where they're coming from and you don't know what is going to be that trigger that might loosen that confidence a little bit. And so, yeah, like you said, it's just about going back and listening and meeting people where they're at. But that was also a very surprising. I did not expect my reaction to be as vulnerable as it was.
Yeah.
And so that was.
Well, and I really appreciate it because not that I appreciate that I hurt you.
You made me cry.
But I know I made you cry. But what I appreciated in this situation was here we're really trying to be intentional. Here we're having really conversations about our intentions. Yeah. And I still blew it. But the thing is, I knew right away I blew it. And maybe that's the part of this whole thing is just being aware, waking up, right? Waking up, being aware of when we step on toes. And you were really gracious. You forgave me and you let me backtrack. You didn't cancel me. Thank you. Anyways, I just really appreciate that.
I know this is not the purpose of today's topic, but I could almost cry right now because you
feel heard.
I feel really heard. I also am so grateful for you. And I hope, and I know listeners out there might think, I don't know, we're the perfect mother and daughter relationship. And
I made her cry.
I cried and had a minor panic attack that night that I don't think she even knows about. But I'm really grateful that we can move past this. And I do think a lot of the work that we've been doing has helped strengthen our relationship too. And so I think it is good for listeners to understand
this is hard
stuff. This is the journey. We are not here from day one. Yeah. And we still do make mistakes even within our own relationship. Yeah. And so anyways, I feel so grateful for you.
Thank you. Yeah. And I have to say, this is one of the things that I like our language of wake up versus woke, because woke feels like a done term. Like I'm woke, whereas waking up, I think it's a lifetime journey. And we're really trying to embody these feelings. So, okay, my topic today.
It's your topic today.
Thank you. But anyway.
Thank you.
My topic today is not a new topic, but because it's been so much in the news, I guess I want to take some time and think about it a bit. Okay. And so my first question is kind of a silly question, but I'm going to ask it. I kind of just want to know your thoughts on all this DEI backlash. It's everywhere and it's happening. Well, I don't have to explain it. What is your response when I just ask you about this DEI backlash?
I mean, I think it's horrible. I think. So I have a couple different feelings about this. So let me unpack some things. First of all, I think DEI are amazing efforts if done correctly in so many areas of life, in corporate America, in schools. And essentially what it's doing is giving people the tools to think outside of themselves and to think in different perspectives if it's done correctly. I think, unfortunately, like a lot of things, the terminology has created a lot of misconceptions around it, like misconceptions on who it benefits, misconceptions on what it is. There's a lot there. Then there's the other thing that I've learned, because I am very passionate and obviously we're going to get into this discussion, and something that you will probably bring up. But what I've learned, and which is so interesting, is that a lot of people hate it because they feel like it's being forced on them.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in a second.
And I think we've talked about that. We mentioned it slightly before, how people are much more apt to do things if it's a pull system instead of a push system. So they pull for the info instead of it being pushed onto them. Unfortunately, that's asking people to do the right thing outside of themselves. And so I don't know if that's ever going to happen with this. But so those are my initial thoughts around it. But like, let's unpack what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I have so many more thoughts on how this is going to be really impactful to our nation in not a positive way.
So it's so funny when you said, I think the terminology has been misunderstood. Isn't that ironic? It couldn't be more direct. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Those three words are really strong words. And I think it's like one of those things that because it's become weaponized in some weird kind of way, we now feel like that's not a clear word.
Totally. But I think diversity is a scary word to a lot of people. I don't understand that, but
I don't either because it's diversity is in the biospheres, anything, but it is.
But people like to be...
They don't like change.
No, they like to be, homogenous. They like to be the same.
So one of the things that Jonelle and I have committed to is when we're kind of curious about a topic, we do a little bit of a deep dive. So it's interesting when you use the word exhaustion, right? That people feel exhausted. So I kept asking, why the DEI backlash? Why is this backlash? So I've been doing some research, and the word exhaustion, especially white exhaustion, came up. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me your initial reaction, because I find this, I think we're going to be along, but wait till I tell you what actually it was. But go on.
White exhaustion.
When you hear the language white exhaustion, what do you think it is?
Well, obviously, I've rolled my eyes twice now.
Yeah.
I get so frustrated with my fellow peer, and when I mean peer, white people, is because I don't know why they're exhausted. I mean, I think the thing is I don't know how to say what I'm saying. I don't know why they're exhausted. I don't know why they're frustrated. I don't understand. But I lead with kindness. I lead with curiosity. And so this is where I get confused, and this is kind of where I roll my eyes is why
are they exhausted?
Why are they exhausted? And anyways, go into it, because I can understand in a sense.
I am so grateful. This is so funny because when I heard the word white exhaustion, right away, my flags went up like, and this is the generational thing, right? You immediately went to your peers and I immediately went to my peers. Like one of the things that I've heard as we've talked about whiteness, for example, is, my God, I grew up poor as well. I grew up without benefit, this or that. I lived in an apartment. Some of the things that, and rightfully so, my parents worked 3 jobs, so I took it from like exhaustion about the comparative aspects. You took it from, I don't understand my white peers are exhausted. So I am glad we're unpacking this, because what I learned, because at first when I read the word white exhaustion, I was going to go into a whole other diatribe, and it was going to probably even be a little shame-based, right?
Like I was just a second.
Well, and I was too, right? And what I'm hearing or reading, and one thing that Jonelle's doing is awesome, is she's taking the time to write these blog posts. And so I'm giving her my research and my links, and she'll kind of formulate it into words. So thank you, Jonelle. But one thing I heard, that a lot of persons are exhausted because after George Floyd, became a really big impetus for kind of white women in particular to step in to really work towards change. Gosh, I was kind of glad to read that, glad to hear that. That's your peer people. Okay. And what happened is no results. We became exhausted because there's no results, or the results have been limited. And so it's interesting. We weren't really exhausted about doing the work. We weren't exhausted about my preconceived things like the narrative, like, oh, poor is me, poor is me. We were exhausted because we didn't see change.
Interesting. So
isn't that interesting?
That's so fascinating. And so what you're kind of telling me is I hear white exhaustion as, more maybe people who are very anti-DEI in general.
Yes.
But you're saying the white exhaustion is actually coming from the probably a little bit more progressive group who just hasn't seen progress, and so they're done with it. And does that not explain American capitalism
Exactly.
in a nutshell?
So this is so fascinating because I think then it goes back to so many conversations we've had about clickbait, right? That they'll take the news studies like you and I just did. We took the bait and it said white exhaustion, and we both embedded this kind of philosophy on what white exhaustion was, because I'm the first one to say, as a white person, racism is rampant, right? But what I'm hearing and what I'm reading more is this idea of we're not seeing results. Now, that is embedded in a results-oriented society, because if you look at our poor friends that are on the margins, people with disabilities, people with gender equity issues, people that with race issues and ethnicity or immigration, they're living all the time in spaces without results. But white exhaustion primarily is around this language of
and
not getting results.
That's exactly what I was going to comment on isn't this just another reason why marginalized people can't trust white people?
Yeah.
It's because it goes back to, like, we're well-intentioned, but because we don't have to live in it, we have the opportunity to step out when we're exhausted. I'm done. I'm not seeing progress. And that is something that is so ingrained in us. We must take action to see progress.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
And we want to see data that there's some product.
Data. It goes back to even our conversation earlier of why you were so critical of me. It is your role to critique design elements. And I hadn't finished my design elements, but you went straight into wanting action and results. And so you did. And so you went in without letting me explain, hey, this is not finished, but this is where I'm going. Yeah. And so isn't that fascinating?
There's more. And I do have, speaking of results, though, let me give you good results, some good data points. Let me find this here, because this was really encouraging. So this was a stat that I found that, here, I have to kind of blow it up so I can read the stat.
Yeah, go
These
for it.
were some stats that I found, and they were published in August of 2024.
Okay.
So pre-election and I should say right now we're in the point, what is it called? The presidential, what is it? What are these? The president's statements, or why am I forgetting what he calls these?
Is it inaugural address?
No, I'll get to it. But anyways, these are corporations. So 97% of companies have at least one DEI initiative. That's really amazing. Yeah. 85% have a dedicated DEI budget. This was, again, August 2024. Yeah. 82% of U.S. organizations are measuring the business impacts of DEI. 78% prioritize DEI more than the previous year, with 45% foreseeing increasing their DEI budgets in the next financial year. Now, that was August 2024.
I would love to see the statistics of now, because as we know.
But I want to say, as a white woman, after 2020, if you were exhausted because you didn't see change, there was clearly some change. And now, whether they were actionable or whether we saw results, I have more to say on this.
Okay.
I don't know, but I do. That's encouraging. DEI efforts made a difference within corporations. Okay, so here's the biggie of why executive orders. That's the word I was trying to think.
Executive orders. Got it.
Here's the biggie that another percent, and it was like 51%. It wasn't a great number, but it was enough of a number, I think, to cause some understanding.
Okay.
And again, Jonelle put all this data in the blog. One of the things first of all, many CEOs, as we know, are white males. There are, I think it's still only like 1 or 2%, maybe 3% Black persons in large CEO positions, okay?
Yeah.
Many CEOs, 51% of CEOs, complained that by having these DEI initiatives within their companies, they had a concrete way of people complaining about them. So in other words, because another one is many DEI people that are heading these DEI initiatives talked about their frustration because the leadership does not own the DEI initiatives. They just simply say, hey, we have them. And so they're usually rested in HR. They're usually rested in a DEI department, but the CEOs themselves have not led with DEI initiatives. So the CEOs are the ones, and I don't want to say all of them because clearly there's probably plenty out there, but the CEOs themselves feel like it's created a tangible measurement for their employees and for people outside of the company to actually complain about them for not doing something related to diversity. And that is why they're complaining.
Interesting. I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think because, one, I wonder then if any of those companies or those CEOs have like corporate surveys, like, their annual surveys to see how things, and if they do, are they listening? I do know, and we kind of briefly talked about this on a previous podcast about how, actually, I think it was last time with the 1/3 rule, how leadership really needs to be the drivers for things to really work out. And I was at a company where I was in an org where a leader was very driven on DEI, and it really motivated the team to get things done and to learn and to be open and curious. And again, as I said in the very beginning, also what it did is created curiosity for the business in general. Yeah. It's interesting. So a lot of these DEI tools, like the tools of what you're learning with DEI, helped the business overall and stuff. And so I think because it gave their teammates like critical thinking skills, it gave them curiosity skills. And so it's interesting, but at the same company, outside of that organization,
that
department, no, just the org within it, there were other leaders who did not lead, and they made it definitely of an employee up scenario, and it didn't work well when it was employee-led and not leader-led.
This is what's so interesting. So when we talk about employee-led, this is what the CEOs were getting frustrated with, is that as the employees became more intentional and embodied DEI principles, they had expectations they wanted to put onto their CEOs, and their CEOs were uncomfortable with it. So what we're hearing,
because their CEOs are white men.
Yeah. So what we're hearing, and when we use the term white men, I'm not against white men. No. That's not my goal here, but the goal is to open our eyes to what are part of these sound bites. So when we're hearing white people are exhausted, they're exhausted because no one's done anything about it. They're in their work. When we're hearing that people want backlash, what we're hearing is CEOs are backlashing, and that it's trickling down to us as if we all own this language.
So I have a question here.
Yeah.
So we've learned white women are exhausted. We've learned we're walking away because we haven't seen progress. So what can we do? Did you unpack that?
Like, but I think this is why I wanted, this is what I wanted to, I think one of the things is possibly DEI initiatives, like maybe we're not promoting how we've done. Like I thought that stat that I read earlier was like amazing. Like what has happened in corporations, what we've learned. But I do have to say I want to say one other thing that I think is kind of interesting and maybe it'll bite people in the butt. So I've been following this legal firm, and they constantly write things to their clients about what to be concerned about with legalities. Well, all these executive orders, and we'll have a link. I have a link to theirs. There's like 4 or 5 specifically to DEI. And basically, they're weighing themselves out on that it's discriminatory practice to make preference towards protected persons. Okay. That's what they're saying. That's essentially what this is.
Okay.
The challenge is it's so wishy-washy that so companies now are just kind of taking off their DEI, but we also now have rights because in the Civil Rights Act, it still says that they have to protect us. And the protected groups are race, sex, age, disability, and genetic information. So this is they're circling. It's a big, giant circle. And we need to keep pressuring our companies, our corporations to think about there is no direct language about this this executive orders against DEI initiatives. I mean, they're not, it's circular, if that makes sense. Okay. I don't know. Maybe I'm not.
I think I get a little of what you're saying. I get a little lost in the loop of it. But it is about pressuring companies. I completely agree. And there's a lot of stuff around Target, how Target just went flat out and said, we're cutting DEI. And then I'm really happy. I have not shopped at Target since. I know a ton of people haven't. It's really impacted their bottom line. But it's interesting. I started having some conversations. So I have a couple friends who are in government affairs at different corporations. And all of these corporations are ones that have really stood by their DEI practice.
Yeah.
And I've been and it's been
Shout out to
Costco, Starbucks, Nordstrom. There's a lot of great companies who are really standing behind their DEI practice that are in the Northwest here.
Yeah.
But what I've learned from these people in the government affairs is that's not easy. The reason why Target folded is a lot of these companies are getting threatened with the idea of having to face the Senate over their DEI practices.
Yes.
And so that's where, even though we're mad at Target for folding and it feels like Target did it out of nowhere, it's not actually out of nowhere. And so that's kind of the interesting thing about it. And I do agree it's good that we impact their bottom line, but there's more layers to then it just being the CEOs is what I think that's kind of your thing at.
Well, and one of the
there's
things
more layers than it just being a CEO issue.
As I did look into this, like what's the backlash, one of the things that I saw, which was really fascinating, is most people actually like the diversity at their corporations, that the diversity of the corporation is not the issue. The issue may just be at top. And so I think, again, we're opening up these conversations. I think it's worth looking at. And I walked into that conversation thinking it was all of us, us middle people or whatever, and that we might be coming with our preconceived bias. Are we again being just led by the few rather than leaders. The majority?
Well, and again, I think, we need to close that pier a little bit. It's been a great conversation today. But I do want us to really think about, and this is homework I'll assign us for next time.
Okay, good.
I do really want us to think about, again, how can we overcome our white exhaustion? Because that is a continual thing we keep bringing up. We haven't used that term white exhaustion, but I brought it up a couple weeks ago about wanting to turn my brain off from these subjects because it's so overwhelming. Realizing, I can't walk away because marginalized people can't walk away. So I got to keep staying in this. But again, the white exhaustion, this is why time and time again, we as white men show that we're not fully trustworthy. And I know as individuals, we might be trustworthy, but as a whole, I can see why we're not trustworthy because we back down when we're tired or something else happens or we need a break. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't get that break.
Well, and I think, knowledge is power, right? And I think if we realize, one of the things that I learned in this is I learned that part of our exhaustion just might be because we're not getting immediate results. Okay, folks, we're not getting immediate results. It doesn't mean that we're not moving the needle. We need to keep moving the needle. And so maybe that's part of this is why, for example, I feel like I'm changing just by being in the conversation. Maybe that's part of this, be okay with if our data isn't switching big at this point.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Because I don't think, though, that will motivate a lot of people seeing larger data. Hearing at another company, people, unfortunately, they want to see it in their everyday life. And so, and I do have to say this is a little bit why or at least from my perspective, why I started this podcast is because I was so defeated because I thought we as a collective whole of white women had progressed over the last 8 years.
Yeah.
And then to find out we hadn't progressed and I'm sitting there putting my work in and not all my peers are doing the same, it devastated me that, okay, I need to push further.
Yeah.
And so...
But your peers, this is what I think we might need to listen to is your peers are doing the work. We're just exhausted. So now we need to give ourselves a different criteria to step into this space to stay with it.
And that's exactly a different criteria. Yes, because what you were saying about maybe if we see the big picture, but I don't think those big pictures are. And so it's figuring out what that different criteria
keeps motivating us to stay in the story.
Yes. To fight against white exhaustion.
Yeah.
White women exhaustion.
Yeah, but also, and I don't want to center white women. What it is staying intentional in the story so that we move towards equity for our protected people.
Totally. And it's not about, I don't think we're centering white women with this.
Isn't that funny when we call it a protected group? It is the most unprotected group. Yeah, I mean, that's an irony. That's another story.
It's a whole nother topic. But the point is, because we really got to cut us off for today, we got to say goodbye. But I want to say, I don't think by saying this, we are centering white women.
Okay,
because our goal is also as white women to grow together, to move together for growth. And I think centering, in my mind, is praising white women, is uplifting white women. We're not really doing that. We're just being honest with our peers and saying, let's take a look. Stay in it. Let's take a look. So in my mind, I don't think we're centering, but that's a good feedback to hear from people.
It was wild. I walked into that research completely different. With a lot of bias.
Obviously, I did too.
So keep going.
Come on.
Doing the work.
We're here.
We can do it.
Yes, one step at a time.
Our sisters want us to be allies, to lift up, to make change, and we all can do it.
I love that.
Okay, wait, what's our homework again?
To change the criteria to defeat white exhaustion.
Okay.
How can we move past white exhaustion?
I can do it.
We need to change the criteria. So what would that criteria of growth be?
I like homework. Okay.
Perfect.
Bye.
It's been so great, everyone. Please leave comments, feedback, discussion. Follow us on social media at White Women Wake Up.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. Have a great one.
Don't forget to read Jonelle's blog. She's doing such a good job.
Please.
Bye.
Bye.